Have you ever trusted someone so deeply that you couldn't imagine them hurting you, until they did it with a smile? My name is Ethan Carr, and this is the story of how I lost my wife, nearly lost my life savings, and how staying silent, observant, and just a few steps ahead changed everything. It started with a calm phone call from Anna, my wife of 14 years. She said she'd found clarity at a retreat in Sedona, that she was leaving me for someone who understood her better, and that she had already transferred all the money from our joint account into hers. What she didn't know, what she never bothered to ask, was that I had seen this coming, and that I had prepared for it in a way she never imagined. This isn't a story about rage. It's not even about revenge in the way you might think. It's about precision, patience, and protecting yourself when the person you love becomes someone you no longer recognize, so stay with me. Because by the end of this story, you'll see how a quiet man with a calm voice can turn betrayal into something far more powerful than revenge. The call came just after 6 p.m. on a Thursday. I had just finished reviewing logistics contracts for a new client and was pouring myself a cup of coffee when Anna's name flashed across my phone screen. She was supposed to be in Sedona, attending a 3-day mindfulness retreat, one of many she'd taken lately in the name of finding clarity. Her voice was composed, almost rehearsed. "Ethan, I need to tell you something." I stopped pouring, already sensing what was coming. "I'm not coming back. I've met someone. His name is Derek Sloan. You've probably heard me mention him. He's the coach who runs those seminars on purpose and alignment." I let her speak without interruption. She continued with almost eerie serenity. "He sees something in me, Ethan. Something I don't think you ever really did. And before you react, I've already moved the money." I paused, now standing still in the kitchen. "What money?" "Our joint savings," she said. "It was just over $190,000. My lawyer said it was smart to separate things early." She spoke the way she did with strangers when she wanted to sound reasonable, but she wasn't talking to a stranger. She was talking to me, the man who'd been beside her for 14 years, the man who paid off her graduate loans, the man who supported every spontaneous reinvention she chased in the name of growth. "You understand?" "Right?" she asked. That question, that soft, manipulative tone, I'd heard it before when she didn't want accountability but wanted to appear kind. I took a deep breath. "I understand," I replied, and hung up. Then I walked calmly to my home office, opened my laptop, and logged into our financial dashboard. Just as I expected, the transfer was sitting in the system. Initiated, but not completed. A small message blinked beneath the amount. Pending second authorization. 6 weeks earlier, I'd quietly added dual approval settings for all transactions over $10,000. Anna never noticed. She wasn't detail-oriented. She didn't need to be. That was my job. She believed she'd walked away with everything. But what she didn't know, what she never bothered to ask, was that she'd just pulled the trigger on a trap I'd set with absolute precision. And it had just snapped shut. I didn't call her back. I didn't message, argue, or ask questions. I simply closed the laptop and sat down with my cup of coffee, now cold. There was no rush, no panic. Because what Anna thought was a masterstroke, moving the money before I could react, was actually the clearest sign that everything I had prepared for was about to fall into place. Months earlier, I had sensed something shifting in her behavior. The retreats, the vague explanations about business collaborations, the sudden interest in financial independence, a phrase she had rarely used in our 14 years together. I had spent my entire career analyzing vulnerabilities in systems, supply chains, vendor contracts, and infrastructure risk. But the most fragile system of all turned out to be the one I'd built with her. She believed she had moved our savings into her control. But that account, what she believed was our main savings, was nothing more than a decoy. I had created it 6 months earlier, funded with exactly $192,000 from the sale of a rental property. It was visible, accessible, and shared. But it wasn't everything. Not even close. While she was attending one of her conscious leadership, seminars, I was meeting with an asset protection attorney. Together, we quietly moved the bulk of our wealth, roughly $720,000, into a discretionary trust under my name only, governed by state-level protections and legal clauses that couldn't be touched without a court order. And she had signed off on all of it. I'd handed her forms labeled for tax reclassification, and she signed them distractedly while scrolling through photos of her retreat. She never asked what the forms did, never read the fine print. That trust wasn't just a legal boundary, it was a firewall. The transfer she had initiated now sat in limbo, caught by the very security protocol I had implemented, dual authentication. She needed my approval and she would never get it. There was something satisfying about the stillness in that moment. Not revenge, not yet, but clarity, a quiet affirmation that my instincts had been right. I didn't need to confront her. I didn't need to yell or rage. I just had to follow the plan, and the plan was working. It hadn't always been this way. There was a time when I looked at Anna and saw someone deeply rooted, someone who thrived on intimacy and stability. But things began to shift subtly, almost imperceptibly, like cracks forming beneath wallpaper. I first noticed it last fall. She had started mentioning a man named Derek Sloan. At first he was just a guest speaker at one of her retreats. Then he became a mentor, then a visionary, and finally a spiritual guide. The titles escalated faster than I could process, but I said nothing. I listened, and I watched. The signs weren't explosive. They were quiet, intentional. She began taking longer showers at night and locking her phone screen immediately when I walked into a room. She installed new apps I didn't recognize and started using words like alignment, energy, and sovereignty in conversations. That used to be about dinner plans and property taxes. She started sleeping facing the other side of the bed, no longer curling into me, no longer asking how my day was. There was one night in particular that sealed it for me. She came home from what was supposedly a sound healing session with her wellness group. She was wearing makeup, too much for a sound bath. Her perfume lingered longer than usual. She smiled when I asked how it went but gave no details, just a vague, it was, transformative. And then she walked away, texting someone before she reached the hallway. I didn't confront her. I opened my laptop and began a folder labeled, simply, Anna. Inside it I logged everything. Timestamps of retreat registrations, lift receipts from cities she claimed she wasn't in, overlapping charges on our joint credit card, dinners for two at rooftop restaurants during silent meditation weekends. I screenshotted her social media posts, compared them to conference schedules, pulled IP data from her email logins, and stored security footage from our Ring camera when she left home at hours that didn't match her stated agenda. It wasn't suspicion anymore. It was confirmation, and I knew that if I brought it up then, if I exploded emotionally, it would all vanish. She'd spin the story, play victim, delete evidence. So instead I said nothing. I let her think I was distracted by work. I let her think I was blind. But every lie she told just made my case stronger. Every secret she kept brought me closer, to the moment I would quietly take it all back. The deeper I looked, the more obvious it became. This wasn't a phase, and it wasn't confusion. Anna was preparing for an exit. A clean break, or so she thought. But while she drifted further into Derek Sloan's world of mantras and manipulation, I stayed grounded in mine. One made of contracts, financial structures, and long-game strategy. 3. Months before that phone call from Sedona, I scheduled a series of meetings with Marcus Denton, a former federal litigator turned estate planning attorney. I told him everything, calmly, with documentation to back it up. He didn't blink. "You're not angry," he said. "That'll serve you." Anger clouds judgment, precision protects it. With Marcus's help, I restructured everything. I opened a discretionary living trust in my name alone, protected under state marital exemption laws. The assets included all real estate, long-term investments, and deferred retirement accounts. On paper, the joint account was untouched. That was intentional. We left a trail, one she could follow. Next, we rewrote the ownership structure of our home. I offered Anna a form to sign, masked as a refinancing request to lower our insurance premiums. She signed it without reading it. On the same day, she was rushing to book flights to Santa Fe for another workshop. That form officially relinquished her claim to the house in the event of a separation. Then came the accounts. I left the visible joint checking and savings untouched, but drained their contents slowly into accounts she couldn't see. A portion was filtered into an S&P index fund tied to the trust. Another portion was reallocated as a private investment vehicle under my LLC. Everything I did was legal, documented, quiet. I even changed our life insurance beneficiaries just in case. Not out of spite, but to make sure my assets couldn't be redirected if she made a move in court. But the move I'm most proud of was the dual authorization safeguard on our banking portal. Marcus helped me set it up. Any transaction over $10,000 needed both of our digital signatures to execute. It had taken 5 minutes to activate and would prove to be the 5 most important minutes of our marriage's final chapter. Anna never noticed. She didn't ask questions. She never suspected the man she dismissed as emotionally detached had already begun sealing every possible door behind her. She was planning to vanish with my money and start a new life. But when the time came, it would be her who had nothing but smoke and spiritual slogans to hold on to. There's a strange ache that comes from remembering the good times with someone who no longer exists. Before all this, before Derek Sloan and the retreats and the secrets, Anna and I were a real team. We met in Boston at a leadership conference. I was presenting on systems logistics, and she was in the audience, working as a behavioral therapist for a nonprofit. She asked a sharp question during the Q&A about moral risk in crisis planning. After the session, we ended up talking over coffee for nearly 3 hours. That night, I walked her to her hotel, and we stood under the awning as it rained, debating philosophy, organizational theory, and whether people actually change. We married 2 years later. No big wedding, just a quiet ceremony in Vermont with a dozen close friends and a weekend in the mountains. We rented a cabin and talked about kids, house plans, and how we'd eventually start a consulting firm together. For the first few years, it felt like we were building something stable, intentional. Every Sunday we went grocery shopping together. We budgeted. We read aloud from the same book before bed. We were that couple. Then we started trying for children. 2 years, nothing. We saw a specialist. I still remember the doctor's face when he explained it. My sperm count was too low for natural conception. I think a part of me broke in that sterile room. I tried to laugh it off. I even joked that the universe must have decided the world didn't need more logisticians. Anna didn't laugh. She cried in the car on the way home. I tried to comfort her, but something in her pulled away from me that day. Something never quite came back. She threw herself into work. She started moonlighting as a creative coach for wellness brands. It was around that time she began using phrases like higher purpose and energetic mismatch. I tried to support her. I paid for courses, built her website, edited videos for her Instagram page. But I never quite fit into that world. My language was too literal, too measured, and slowly her sentences stopped including me. I want to expand. I need space to evolve. I heard those words so often I started finishing them in my head before she said them. We stopped taking vacations. We stopped making love. Our conversations dwindled to schedules and errands. But I held on. Because even in the stillness, I remembered who we had been. I remembered the woman who stood in the rain that night in Boston and made me feel seen. I just didn't realize she had vanished long before she ever picked up the phone to leave. The first time I saw Derek Sloan in person was on Anna's laptop screen. She was watching one of his live streams, headphones in, mouthing along to his affirmations like they were scripture. I stood quietly in the doorway and watched. Derek was in his late 30s, lean, with the carefully rugged look of someone who spends more time curating his image than living in it. He wore beaded necklaces, had a tattoo of an eagle feather on his forearm, and spoke with that syrupy, self-assured tone you hear from people who think charisma is the same as wisdom. You are not your contracts. he said. You are not your attachments. You are your becoming. Anna ate it up. It started with his videos, then his books. Soon she was attending his private seminars, first in Phoenix, then in Costa Mesa, and eventually Sedona, the same place she would call me from to end our marriage. She became part of his inner circle mentorship group. Derek offered personalized guidance to spiritually gifted women navigating misaligned partnerships. That's what she told me when she forwarded me a $2,800 invoice for a weekend session. I paid it. The more he appeared, the more I understood that Derek wasn't just a catalyst, he was the architect of her escape plan. And Anna wanted to be chosen. She would come home quoting him. Derek says resistance is the ego's last defense. Or, Derek reminded us that true rebirth only comes when we destroy the old blueprint. She stopped referring to us as a couple. It was just I, my path, my healing. She wasn't looking for a partner. She was looking for a witness. The worst part wasn't her obsession with him. It was the way she began to speak, to me like I was beneath her growth, like I was a case study in stuckness. She once looked at me during dinner and said, "Sometimes I feel like I'm evolving and you're just maintaining." That hurt more than I expected. Not because it was cruel, but because it was rehearsed. It sounded like something Derek had said to someone else and she had borrowed it. I was no longer her husband. I was a concept she'd outgrown. She thought Derek was her future, that he was the ticket to some higher version of herself, but she never stopped to wonder what kind of man watches women burn their lives down for him and smiles while they do it. 2 days after the call from Sedona, Anna didn't return home, but someone else did. Around midday, I heard the doorbell ring. Standing on the porch was Juliet, Anna's longtime friend and sometimes business collaborator. She was dressed in a sharp beige coat despite the warm afternoon, her hair pulled back tight, makeup too heavy for a casual visit. She clutched her bag like she was bracing for a confrontation. "Hey," she said, not quite making eye contact. Anna asked me to stop by, to pick up a few of her things. I stepped aside wordlessly, letting her in. She walked into the living room like it was unfamiliar now, even though she'd spent countless Sunday brunches on our couch. I motioned toward the staircase. Her closet's untouched. Jewelry box is in the safe. She still knows the combination. Juliet hesitated. She, also asked me to check if the transfer went through. There it was, the real reason for her visit. Not sentiment, not support, just confirmation. I walked to the kitchen counter, opened my laptop, and turned the screen toward her. The dashboard displayed one clear message beneath the $192,000 transfer Anna had initiated. Pending, awaiting second authorization. Juliet's face fell. She thought it would clear instantly. "I know," I replied. She always thought. She understood systems better than she did. She shifted uncomfortably. She was certain you wouldn't notice. I closed the laptop gently. Then she didn't know me at all. Juliet nodded, then quietly gathered a suitcase from the hallway. As she rolled it toward the front door, she paused. She really believes Derek is offering her something better. She's convinced this is a new life, a cleaner slate. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "Tell her this isn't about the money. It's about the method." Juliet studied me for a moment. "You're not angry, are you?" "No," I said honestly. "I was angry 6 months ago. Now I'm just finishing a process." She left without another word. I stood at the window and watched her car pull away. That suitcase was filled with designer clothes, overpriced crystals, and curated chaos. But she didn't leave with what mattered most, because Anna hadn't just lost control of the money, she'd lost control of the narrative. That same afternoon, after Juliet left, I gathered my folder, the one labeled Anna Legal in plain black ink, and drove to the law office of Marcus Denton. We'd worked together in the past, back when I oversaw high-value contracts for the state's emergency logistics department. Marcus was the kind of lawyer who valued strategy over showmanship. He didn't posture, he prepared. When I walked into his office, he already had 2 mugs of coffee on the table and a legal pad waiting. I handed over the folder without a word. Inside were the documents we'd quietly prepared over the last 8 weeks: account logs, transfer histories, screenshots of Anna's messages, her Sedona booking with Derek's name on the guest record, and, most importantly, the signed paperwork verifying her consent to asset transfers and property restructuring. Marcus flipped through the pages with the composure of someone used to high-stakes fallout. "She has no idea what she signed," he said finally, "but that doesn't make it less binding." "She thought I was just a man with a calendar and a budget," I said. "She forgot I was trained to forecast failure." That day, Marcus officially filed for divorce on my behalf. The claim wasn't based on infidelity, though we had enough circumstantial evidence to prove it. Instead, we went for something cleaner: financial misconduct and abandonment of marital agreement. It was surgical, cold, yes, but impossible to refute. We included a restraining request for property access, citing her attempt to move funds without consent. The account history, combined with her absence and her use of a proxy, Juliet, to access belongings, made the case stronger than either of us expected. "I want this done quietly," I told him. "No threats, no drama, just structure." Marcus nodded. "She'll come at you with emotions. That's all she has left." And he was right. She had built her strategy on assumption, not law, on charisma, not consequence. By the time I left his office, a legal freeze had been placed on all marital property not already secured in my trust. The house, once considered shared, was now fully under my name by contractual transfer. The joint account, emptied in appearance, had been legally recategorized as a low-access holding account months ago. Anna thought she had made the first move. In reality, she'd stepped onto a chessboard I had designed months in advance. And now, piece by piece, her options were vanishing, silently, legally, irrevocably. 3 days after the filing, just as Marcus predicted, Anna showed up unannounced. I had just returned from a run, still in a sweatshirt and joggers, when I heard the front door open. She still had her key. Of course she did. She never thought she'd need to give it back. I met her in the living room, the space that used to feel shared but now felt like mine alone. She was dressed in a crisp white blouse, the kind she wore to Derek's events, effortlessly curated, polished, performative. Her makeup was heavier than usual, her eyes sharp, lips pressed together, in a tight, unreadable line. "What did you do?" she asked, skipping pleasantries. She held up her phone, thrusting it toward me. On the screen, a red warning across her bank app: transfer denied, dual authorization required. I didn't flinch. "You tried to move money that requires both our signatures," I said calmly. "That's been the protocol for months. You never told me about that. You never asked." Her expression cracked for just a second. "You're manipulating this." "No, I'm protecting what I've built." She started pacing. "That's our money, Ethan. I earned that too. You can't just lock me out." I motioned toward the dining table where a manila folder sat unopened. "Actually, I can, and I have." She picked up the folder and opened it. Her eyes scanned the pages: bank statements, transfer logs, and the signed asset release form with her signature dated 6 weeks prior. I didn't know what I was signing. "Still counts," I said quietly. Her voice turned sharp, bitter. "I should have known. You've always been a step ahead, haven't you? Always planning, always calculating." I didn't respond. "I didn't need to. You don't get to do this to me," she snapped. "You don't get to make me look like the reckless one." "You did that yourself," I replied. She crossed the room and grabbed the framed photo on the mantel, us, in Portugal, before everything began to unravel, and hurled it against the wall. It shattered, glass skidding across the hardwood. "Derek was right about you," she hissed. "You're small. No passion, no ambition, just numbers." I looked down at the broken frame, the web of cracks over my smiling face. Then I looked back at her. Leave your key." For a long moment she stood still. Then she reached into her bag, pulled out the key, and dropped it on the coffee table with a metallic clink. "This isn't over," she said, her voice trembling now. "Yes," I said, looking her in the eye. "It is." The silence after she left felt heavier than I expected. Not suffocating, just dense like the air after a thunderstorm. For the first time in months, maybe years, the house was quiet in a way that didn't feel uncertain. I swept up the broken glass from the photo frame, piece by piece, placing each shard in a plastic bag. There was something final about it. The image itself was intact, oddly enough, our smiles frozen beneath the fractured surface. I slid it into a drawer and didn't look at it again. Over the next few days, I expected backlash, and it came, but not in the form of rage or legal maneuvering. It came in the form of silence. Then slowly, as if testing the waters, came the messages. First, a voice note. "I've been thinking. Maybe we should talk. Maybe we both said things we didn't mean." I didn't respond. Then a second. "I shouldn't have come in like that. I was emotional. Derek and I, it's complicated." Still, I didn't respond. On the fourth day, she showed up again. This time without makeup. No curated blouse, no spiritual glow. Just jeans, sneakers, and a hoodie she'd once stolen from my closet. She looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I just saw her differently now. "I just want to talk," she said softly, standing on the porch. I didn't say anything, but I opened the door. She stepped in carefully, like a stranger in someone else's house. She sat on the edge of the couch, barely touching the cushion. "I made a mistake," she said, voice cracking. "I thought I knew what I wanted. I thought Derek was something he's not." I waited. Let her speak. He talks big, but when things got messy, he pulled back. He said I was too reactive, that I brought drama into his space. She looked up at me. "I gave up everything, and now I don't even know who I am anymore." I nodded. Not in sympathy, just acknowledgement. "I was wrong about you," she added. "You were always solid, boring maybe, but safe." I didn't realize how much that mattered until I lost it. There it was, the sales pitch beneath the sorrow. The same voice she used when negotiating refunds with vendors, or talking skeptical clients into another retreat package. "I'm not here to fight anymore," she said. "I'm here to fix this. Maybe we just needed to break to understand how to rebuild." I stood, walked over to the kitchen, and poured a glass of water. Then I set it on the coffee table between us. "You should talk to your lawyer," I said calmly. Her face fell. "So that's it?" "No," I replied. "That's closure." 2 days later, as if the universe had been waiting for just the right moment, the final piece of the puzzle arrived. Not from Anna and not from her lawyer, but from someone I hadn't expected to hear from again. "Juliet." She texted first. Just one sentence. "We need to talk. Privately." We met at a small coffee shop on the edge of town, the kind of place that plays jazz too loudly and overcharges for herbal tea. She looked nervous, not like someone keeping a friend's secret, but like someone holding on to something that was starting to burn. She slid a small thumb drive across the table. "I shouldn't be doing this," she said, eyes darting. "But I can't watch her get away with it. Not all of it." "What is it?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Emails," she whispered. "Between Anna and Derek, messages, attachments, things she forwarded from your company systems. He used her." I stared at the drive. "Used her how?" Juliet swallowed hard. "He's not just a coach. He's bidding on a state logistics contract, one that requires specific clearance levels. Yours, Ethan. Anna gave him access to your proposals, data from your restricted files, timelines, templates." I felt the weight settle instantly. This wasn't just personal now, it was federal. My firm had handled sensitive emergency supply chains, contracts with national defense implications. She hadn't just betrayed a marriage. She had breached security. "Does she know what he's doing with it?" I asked. "She thinks it's harmless, that he just needed examples. But Derek's been shopping that information to outside consultants. He plans to undercut your company with a transformational bid, and he's doing it under a shell firm, one registered in a different state under a fake name. I stared at the thumb drive. Why give this to me? Because I warned her, Juliet said. She didn't listen. And because I've seen him do this before to 2 other women. He wrecks their lives, calls it freedom, and walks away richer. I took the drive and nodded. This changes everything. Back at home, I plugged it into my laptop. The files were organized by date, emails, audio messages, proposal documents. There it was in black and white. Anna sending confidential specs to Derek's personal email, then his replies, coaching her on what to say, how to explain things, to me, coaching her on how to extract value before she left. One message stopped me cold. It was dated a week before she called from Sedona. Derek. Once you've moved the money, walk, don't look back. He's too passive to fight you. He's the accountant, not the threat. I sat back in my chair, the words echoing like a drumbeat. They had underestimated me, and now I had everything I needed to prove it. The next morning, I met with Marcus and handed him the thumb drive. He plugged it into his encrypted system, reviewed the files in silence, and then leaned back in his chair with a slow exhale. This isn't just personal anymore, he said. This is leverage. I nodded. I don't want her punished. I want her to stop pretending she holds any power here. Marcus crafted a new proposal that afternoon. It was simple, final, and backed by everything we now had. Anna would receive a one-time payout of $40,000, no further access to the trust, no claim to assets, no rights to the house. In exchange, she would sign a non-disclosure agreement preventing her from speaking about the marriage, the financial dealings, or the breach of contract involving Derek. To make the message clear, we included one email from the drive. Just one. Enough to show what we had, but not enough to expose the full scope. We sent the counteroffer to her lawyer that evening. By midday the next day we had a reply. Anna's legal counsel requested an urgent meeting. The tone of the message had shifted. Gone was the posturing. It was now full of carefully chosen words. De-escalation, amicable resolution, preserve privacy. The meeting was held in Marcus's conference room. I arrived early, reviewing the file, every detail in order. When Anna walked in, her posture had changed. The defiance was gone, replaced with the careful silence of someone who knows she's no longer negotiating from strength. Her lawyer, a man named Hayden Cross, did most of the talking. We believe the proposed settlement is harsh considering the length of the marriage, he began. Marcus didn't even flinch. He slid a printed copy of the email across the table. Hayden scanned it and froze. Anna didn't look at it. She didn't need to. She already knew what was there. This is extortion, Hayden said quietly. No, Marcus corrected evenly. This is silence, and silence is valuable, especially when federal laws might have been breached. Anna finally spoke. Her voice was strained. If I sign this, it's over? Yes, I said. No more contact. No further claims. Just closure. She sat still for a moment, then picked up the pen. The room was so quiet, you could hear the scratch of the ink against the paper. When it was done, she pushed the documents across the table and whispered, "Was any of it real?" I looked at her, calm. It was. For me. And that was the difference. 3 days after the agreement was signed, I sat alone in my study, watching the sunset pour amber light across the hardwood floor. The silence in the house felt cleaner. Now, less like an absence, more like a reset. The contracts were filed, the money secured, and the past, for the most part, officially behind me. But one detail remained unresolved. One thread I couldn't leave dangling. Derek Sloan. Anna had walked away with a fraction of what she'd tried to take. That was justice enough for her. But Derek wasn't just a manipulator. He was a thief in designer boots, a man who used charm and pseudo-spiritual mantras to exploit. vulnerable women, weaponize their access, and then discard them when he'd drained their utility. The thumb drive still sat on my desk. Carefully organized folders, email chains, and proposal documents that showed Derek had used Anna, and possibly others, to illegally obtain competitive data from state-level contractors, including my firm. That night, I created a new email account, under an alias, and attached a selection of files. Not everything, just enough to implicate Derek directly in procurement fraud. I made sure to exclude anything that would tie Anna publicly to the breach. Whatever else she'd done, I wasn't interested in destroying her. I just wanted the root of the rot cut clean. I sent the documents to 3 recipients: the compliance director at the Federal Logistics Board, the State Attorney General's office, and the CEO of the firm Derek was planning to undercut using my stolen data. Then I deleted the account permanently. Nothing happened for a week. Then, early one morning, I opened the Denver Tribune and saw a headline in the business section: Self-styled wellness entrepreneur under federal investigation for procurement. Fraud. The article named Derek Sloan directly. It detailed the shell companies, the pattern of acquiring confidential materials through personal relationships, and the sudden suspension of his pending contract bid. A spokesperson from the Department of Public Infrastructure declined to comment, citing an active investigation. No mention of Anna. No mention of me. Later that afternoon, I received a text from an unknown number. I know it was you. No name. No punctuation. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. The truth didn't need recognition. It didn't need applause. It just needed to exist. Like a number finally placed where it belonged. Balanced. Quiet. Undeniable. 6 weeks later, I stood on the balcony of my new place, a modest 2-bedroom townhome on the outskirts of Boulder overlooking the foothills. Smaller than the old house, quieter, simpler, but entirely mine. No shared titles, no uncertain boundaries. The space felt honest, unburdened. Every piece of furniture, every photograph, every detail was chosen, not negotiated. The consulting work had picked up. After the investigation into Derek broke, my former firm asked me to return, this time in a more elevated role. But I declined. Instead, I accepted an offer from a private ethics foundation that specialized in corporate oversight and whistleblower protection. My job now involved auditing compliance systems and mentoring younger analysts who hadn't yet learned the difference between efficiency and integrity. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was building something meaningful again, something that wasn't just profitable but principled. Some of the funds Anna had tried to take were now redirected, through the trust, into a scholarship fund I'd created for students pursuing careers in logistics ethics and public accountability. A small gesture, maybe, but one that turned betrayal into structure. As for Anna, I hadn't heard from her since the final legal correspondence. Through mutual contacts, I learned she'd left Derek shortly after the investigation began. She relocated to Flagstaff and had taken a job as a part-time wellness consultant at a mid-level retreat center. Her social media had gone dark. The glittering promises had faded. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. Around that same time, I started seeing someone new. Her name was Claire. She was a legal compliance officer at a firm I worked with. Intelligent. Grounded. She asked questions before she answered them. She read more than she posted. On our second date, she said something that stayed with me. Real alignment doesn't require declarations. It just fits. There were no declarations anymore in my life. Just calm, steady motion. And as I stood there, the sun setting behind the mountains, I realized that the ache was finally gone. The house didn't feel like a reminder of what I'd lost. It felt like proof of what I'd reclaimed. Some people confuse justice with revenge, but true justice isn't loud. It isn't cruel. It's measured. It's quiet. And it lasts. Not every betrayal needs to end in chaos. Sometimes the most powerful response is calm, silent, calculated. Ethan never screamed. He never begged. He didn't destroy. He prepared, and when the time came, he didn't just protect what mattered most. He transformed it. His story isn't about getting even, it's about getting clear, about understanding that strength isn't in reaction but in structure. That justice doesn't always look like punishment. It often looks like walking away with your dignity intact and your future secured. For any man who's been blindsided, underestimated, or quietly replaced, remember this. The real revenge is becoming untouchable, not in arrogance but in self-possession. When you stop chasing closure and start building clarity, no one can take that from you. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever stayed silent, only to let the truth speak for you later? Drop your story in the comments. Someone else might need it more than you realize. And if this story hit close to home, help it reach someone else. Like, share, or subscribe. Not for the drama, but for the reminder that in the end, some equations do balance themselves.